The Dragon Emperor's throne was carved from obsidian and bone, and the mountain that held it pulsed like a living heart. It was said his wings had once shadowed nations, and that his roar could split storms. But now, in the age of ash and silence, he sat alone upon his black dais, his claws tapping idly against the stone as he regarded the trembling figure brought before him. A woman, small and frail by dragon standards, her wrists bound with silver thread. The chamber around them glowed faintly from rivers of magma that ran through the cracks in the floor, and the scent of scorched air hung thick. The Emperor lowered his massive head until one golden eye filled her vision. "You know who I am, human?" His voice was deep enough to make the stones hum. "I do," she said, her voice quiet but steady. Her hair, once pale, was darkened with soot, and the hem of her tattered dress was burned through. "You are Kael'thar, the last crowned of your kind." A faint smile rippled through the dragon's scaled face. "The last crowned," he repeated. "And you, what are you? Thief? Spy? Or another survivor come crawling from the ruins of your fallen world?" "I am none of those," she said. "My name is Ilara. I came to free the ones you keep below." That drew a murmur from the gathered court. Lesser dragons, worms, and serpents draped in gold and firelight, their laughter like the crack of embers. "Free them," one hissed. "From the mines? The humans belong there. They owe the Emperor their breath." Kael'thar raised a claw, silencing the others. "You speak boldly, Ilara, but you must know, your kind brought this upon themselves. You lit the sky with fire and drowned the seas with your wars. We merely took what remained." Ilara lifted her chin. "Then you are no better than we were," the dragons hissed as if struck. Kael'thar's golden eyes narrowed, but there was curiosity in them too, something ancient and sharp that gleamed beneath the surface. "You come into my court unarmed, wrapped in chains, and insult me? I came knowing I might die," she said. "But if you meant to kill me, you would have done it already." The Emperor stared at her for a long moment, his great chest rising and falling like a tide. Then, slowly, he spoke. "You are right. I do not kill without reason. Tell me, human, why do you wish to free them? What are they to you?" "They are my people," Ilara said simply, "and freedom is worth more than any gold you could offer." A murmur ran through the dragons again, this time softer, confused, perhaps, or intrigued. Kael'thar's tail shifted, its tip striking sparks from the floor. "Freedom," he rumbled. "A word humans love to speak but seldom understand. Do you know what it costs?" "I do," she said. "Everything." He leaned closer, so near she could feel the heat of his breath and smell the smoke that clung to his scales. "Then you will show me what that means." The next thing she knew, she was standing at the edge of a great cavern deep beneath the throne hall, where rivers of molten stone carved paths through black rock. Dozens of humans worked there, their faces hollow, their backs bent beneath the weight of tools and chains. Above them, dragons watched like wardens, their eyes glowing in the dim red light. Kael'thar's voice echoed from behind her. "These are the ones you wish to free. Each has sworn fealty in exchange for their lives. Without my protection, they would perish in the wastelands. Would you take that from them?" Ilara looked out at the weary figures. "They would rather die free than live as slaves." Kael'thar's talons scraped the stone behind her. "You assume death would be swift. You have not seen the storms that scour the world above, or the beasts that hunger for what little flesh remains." "I have." "Then help us," she said. "If your rule is mercy, prove it." The dragon laughed softly, a deep sound like thunder rolling through the mountains. "Help you? And what would you give me in return?" She turned to face him. "Whatever I can." His gaze sharpened. "You would bargain with a dragon, little one?" "If I must." The Emperor lowered his head until his muzzle nearly brushed the ground. "Then here is my offer. You will stay in my court for 7 days. You will speak to me each night and show me why humans are worth saving. If, by the seventh day, I believe your kind deserves freedom, I will let them go." Ilara met his gaze without flinching. "And if you don't?" He smiled, showing teeth the size of swords. "Then you will join them in the mines, and the name Ilara will be lost to the dust." She nodded. "I accept." So began her trial. The first night she was brought to the high chamber again, her chains removed but her guards close. Kael'thar waited beside the great fire, his wings folded like mountains against his back. "Tell me," he said, "why humans fight, even when they know they cannot win." "Because surrender is worse," she said. "Even a small hope is better than none." He tilted his head. "And when that hope burns you?" "Then we burn brighter," she replied. Something in his gaze flickered. Perhaps amusement, perhaps something older. The second night he asked about love. "What drives your kind to bond so tightly with one another when you know all things fade?" "Because it's the only thing stronger than fear," she said. "It's what kept us alive when everything else fell apart." Kael'thar said nothing for a while, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "Dragons do not love as humans do," he said quietly. "We hoard, we guard, we remember. But love, that is a fire we once feared." "Maybe that's why you're still alone," she said softly. The third night he asked about creation. "You built cities that touched the clouds," he said, "and weapons that broke the sky. Why?" "Because we wanted to understand the world," she answered. "And sometimes we forgot that understanding doesn't mean control." Kael'thar studied her for a long time. "Perhaps that was your true sin, not pride, but longing." Each night he grew quieter. The other dragons noticed. They whispered among themselves that their emperor was changing, that the human had stirred something dangerous in him. By the fifth night Ilara had almost forgotten to fear him. They spoke beside the magma flows, their words echoing through the hall like music. "You could have asked for gold," Kael'thar said, his deep voice softer than she had ever heard it. "You could have begged for comfort, for safety. Why freedom?" "Because without it," she said, "we aren't alive. You can cage a body, but you can't cage a soul." He regarded her for a long time, his eyes molten with something she could not name. "And if I freed you now, what would you do?" "I would free the others," she said simply. Kael'thar's jaw tightened. "Even knowing they might die?" "Yes." Silence fell, heavy as stone. Then slowly he said, "You are either the bravest fool I have ever met, or the only honest soul left in this world." On the sixth night, the winds outside the mountain changed. A storm was rising, one of the great tempests that had destroyed the old world. The dragons gathered in the throne hall, their voices filled with unease. Lightning flashed across the black skies, and thunder rolled through the caverns. Kael'thar turned to her, his scales glowing in the flickering light. "When the storm passes, I will give you my answer." That night, as she lay awake in her chamber, she heard the mountain groan under the weight of wind and rain. She thought of the humans in the mines, of their faces turned upward to the darkness, praying to gods that had long since burned away. She thought of Kael'thar too, the loneliness in his eyes, the sorrow in his voice when he spoke of love. Somewhere in that vast ancient heart, she believed, there was still something human. At dawn, the storm broke. And with it, something deep in the mountain's heart began to stir. The seventh day had come. Kael'thar summoned her to the throne once more, his eyes burning brighter than ever. "I have made my decision," he said, "but before I speak it, I must ask one final question." Ilara stood before him, her hands clasped, her heart pounding. "Ask it." He lowered his head, his gaze locking on hers. "If I gave you gold enough to buy a kingdom, power enough to rule what remains of your kind, would you take it instead of their freedom?" She met his eyes without hesitation. "No." Kael'thar was silent for a long moment. Then a slow, deep sound rumbled through his chest. Not anger, but something close to laughter. I thought you might say that. His golden eyes softened. Then the mines will open. Your people will be free. Ilara blinked, stunned. You mean it? I have not spoken in jest for 5 centuries, he said. You have earned what no human has before, my respect. But even as relief flooded her, he added, there is a cost. And in that moment, as the mountain trembled, and the air grew heavy with unseen power, Ilara realized that freedom, like all things worth having, was never given freely. The mountain trembled as if the world itself held its breath. Dust rained down from the vaulted ceiling, glimmering faintly in the molten light. Ilara stood still, heart pounding, as Kelthar's eyes glowed brighter than fire. There is a cost, he repeated, and his voice echoed through the chamber, deeper now, heavy with something beyond anger, something older, almost sorrowful. The dragons of the court shifted uneasily, their wings rustling like the whisper of storms. Freedom cannot be granted without balance, he said, and balance demands blood. Ilara's throat tightened. Whose blood? Kelthar's gaze lingered on her face, searching it as if looking for weakness. Mine, perhaps, or yours. I do not yet know. He turned his great head toward the magma flow, his scales reflecting the molten river. There is an ancient oath that binds my kind, a vow made when dragons ruled the skies, and the gods themselves walked the world. We swore that no race would be freed from our dominion unless one among them paid the price in fire. I'll pay it, she said immediately, the words leaving her mouth before she could think. A murmur of disbelief rippled through the court. Kelthar turned back toward her, smoke curling from his nostrils. You would offer your life so freely? I said I would give whatever I can, she said. And if that's what it takes, then so be it. Kelthar lowered his head until his golden eyes filled her vision again. You do not even know what the right requires. Then tell me. He was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, like the rumble of a dying storm. It is called the rite of binding flame. The fire that enslaved your kind must be turned inward, purified through a living vessel. If you survive, the chains will break. If you fail, both you and those you seek to save will burn. I'll survive, she said. The dragon studied her, the faintest trace of something almost human flickering in his eyes. Your courage borders on madness, Ilara. Maybe that's what it takes to change a world. For a long while, he said nothing. Then he lifted one great claw and gestured toward the vast doors at the far end of the hall. Then come, he said. Let us see if your fire burns as brightly as your words. They descended together into the mountain's heart. The air grew hotter, the walls alive with veins of glowing rock. Dragons lined the path, watching silently as she passed. A lone human walking beside their emperor, her skin pale against his darkness. Some sneered, some looked away, but others, especially the young ones, watched her with something like awe. At last, they reached a cavern unlike any she had seen before. It was a cathedral of flame. Pillars of obsidian rose from rivers of molten gold, and at the center stood a circle of ancient runes carved into the stone. The air shimmered with power. Kelthar stopped at the edge of the circle, his great wings folding in close. This is the crucible, he said. No dragon has entered it in an age. Few ever left. Ilara stepped forward, her voice calm despite the pounding in her chest. What do I do? You step into the circle. The fire will test you. It will see your heart, your memories, your truth. You must not run. You must not lie. If your will breaks, you will die screaming, and your kind's chains will remain forever. Ilara nodded once. Then let's begin. Kelthar's eyes lingered on her for a long moment. If you die, human, know that you have already changed something within me. That alone is no small victory, she met his gaze. Then remember me, Kelthar. That's all I ask. He bowed his head slightly, an ancient gesture of respect, and began to speak in the language of dragons, a deep rolling sound that made the air itself tremble. The runes in the stone flared to life, burning with crimson light. The molten rivers around them surged, and a column of fire rose from the circle, wild and alive. Ilara stepped into it. The world vanished. For a heartbeat there was only pain. Pure, white-hot agony that tore through every vein, every thought. She screamed, but no sound came out. The fire wasn't just burning her body. It was tearing open her soul, dragging her memories into the light. She saw flashes of the old world, the ruins of cities, the skies burning red as the dragons descended, the faces of the lost and the dying. She saw her mother's hands, rough and warm, pushing her into a shelter as flames consumed the sky. "Live," her mother had said. "Live, even if the world ends." Then the fire shifted. It became something else. Not destruction, but vision. She saw Kael'thar, not as he was now, but as he had once been. A young dragon standing before a city of glass and steel, roaring as it fell to ruin. She saw him watching as the humans fought each other, their machines cracking the earth, their weapons scarring the skies. She saw the moment he decided to rule them. Not out of hatred, but sorrow. Then she saw deeper still. His loneliness, his memories of kin long lost, his fear that dragons had become no better than those they conquered. She saw that same spark in him that lived in her. The wish for something better. The flames wrapped tighter around her, and she gasped, forcing herself to stand. "You're not my enemy," she whispered. "You never were." Outside the circle, Kael'thar watched in silence. His claws dug into the stone as the fire raged higher, swallowing her whole. The other dragons whispered among themselves, expecting to see her fall, but she did not. She stood, her silhouette wreathed in gold and white, her eyes glowing like twin suns. The crucible roared, and then, all at once, the fire collapsed inward, vanishing into her chest. The air went still. When the light faded, Ilara stood trembling, but alive. Her skin was unmarked, but a faint glow pulsed beneath it, as if a small flame now lived inside her. Kael'thar stepped forward slowly, his voice a low murmur. "You survived." She met his gaze, her own voice hoarse. "No, we survived." And as she spoke, a sound filled the cavern. 1,000 faint cracks like chains breaking. Above them, deep within the mountain, the humans in the mines gasped as their bonds fell away. The metal links turned to ash, and for the first time in generations, they stood free. Kael'thar lifted his head, his chest swelling with something that might have been pride. "It is done," he said softly. "You have freed them!" The dragons of the court bowed their heads, murmuring words in their ancient tongue. Even the proudest among them could not deny what they had seen. A mortal had walked through dragonfire and lived, but Kael'thar's eyes never left Ilara. "The flame you carry is not merely power," he said. "It is life. It will burn within you until it finds balance. That is the true cost. You are bound to this mountain now, to me. Your freedom and mine are the same flame." Ilara blinked, confusion and exhaustion warring in her mind. "Bound?" He nodded slowly. "The right does not give without taking. You are the vessel now. If I fall, you will burn. If you die, I will fade. That is the bond we have forged." Her breath caught. "You should have told me." "You would have still done it," he said quietly. She couldn't argue. She only nodded, staring at the faint glow in her hands. Days passed. The freed humans emerged from the depths, blinking into the light of the storm-cleansed sky. Some wept, others knelt, unsure if they should pray to the gods or curse them. The dragons watched from the cliffs above, uncertain how to behave in this strange new world where masters and slaves no longer existed. Kael'thar ruled still, but differently. His voice, once sharp with command, had softened. He spoke less of dominion and more of coexistence. Many dragons resisted, fearing weakness, but none dared defy the one who had survived the crucible, and the human who had done the same. Ilara moved among her people, helping them rebuild. The flame inside her pulsed whenever Kael'thar drew near, a silent reminder of their bond. Sometimes she caught his gaze from across the valley and felt the strange connection between them, something that wasn't ownership or duty, but understanding. One night, as the moon rose full and pale, she climbed the high balcony of the mountain hall. Kael'thar waited there, his vast form curled upon the stone. His wings shimmered in the moonlight, and his eyes reflected the stars. "You should rest," he said without looking at her. I can't, she said softly. The flame, it keeps me awake. It's like it's alive. It is, he said. It's part of both of us now. She hesitated, then asked, what happens when balance is found? He turned his head, his golden eyes catching hers. Then one of us will have to choose who remains. Her breath hitched. What do you mean? He looked away again, toward the horizon where the storms had once raged. The world is changing. The flame cannot stay divided forever. One day it will choose a single vessel, dragon or human. That is the way of all creation. Ilara felt her heart twist. And when that day comes? Kael'thar's voice was quiet, almost gentle. Then the one who loves more must let go. They stood in silence, the mountain wind curling around them like smoke. Somewhere far below, the humans sang, a song of freedom that echoed through the night. Ilara listened, her hand pressed to her chest, where the flame burned softly. Then I'll make sure the world is worth saving before that day comes, she said. Kael'thar's eyes softened. You already have. But deep in the mountain's heart, beneath the molten stone and ancient runes, something stirred. The faint echo of a power older than dragons, older than humankind. A whisper carried through the cracks of the world, as if unseen eyes were watching, waiting, and far away, beyond the horizon. A shadow began to rise, one that neither fire nor freedom could easily face. The storms had faded, but the world felt no calmer. The air over the valley shimmered with new energy, alive with the hum of change. The dragons had ceased their endless patrols, their roars no longer echoing over the mountains. Humans had begun to build again, timidly at first, their hands unsure after generations of bondage. Firelight now marked the hillsides where small villages rose from ruin, and for the first time in an age, the sound of laughter touched the wind. Yet Ilara could not rest. The flame within her pulsed stronger with each passing night, its glow beneath her skin brightening like a heartbeat made of light. She often woke gasping, her chest aching as though something inside her strained to break free. Kael'thar felt it too, though he rarely spoke of it. His wings trembled when the bond flared, and sometimes the scales along his chest glowed faintly, mirroring her pain. He had taken to visiting her more often, silent and thoughtful, watching as she worked among the people. The others called her the Fireborn, a living sign that the age of chains had ended. They didn't see the way her hands shook when the fire whispered in her veins, nor the way she sometimes looked toward the sky, as though she feared something vast and unseen waited beyond the stars. One evening, she stood at the edge of the valley, watching the sunset turn the mountains to blood and gold. The air smelled of new grass and ash. Kael'thar landed behind her, his wings folding with the sound of thunder softened by distance. You feel it too, he said quietly. She didn't turn. Something's wrong. The flame, she pressed her hand to her chest. It's not just burning anymore. It's calling. Kael'thar lowered his head beside her, the heat of his breath curling around her shoulders. There is movement beyond the horizon, he said. The elders have sensed it. The winds carry echoes of another power, a voice older than ours. Ilara frowned. Older than dragons? Older than life itself, he murmured. The old fire, the one that birthed our kind before time began. It sleeps beneath the world, but now it stirs. It senses the bond between us, the fire that was never meant to exist in two hearts. She turned toward him, eyes wide. You mean, it's coming for us? He nodded, the motion slow, heavy. If it wakes fully, it will unmake the world to reclaim its flame. The balance we built cannot stand against it. Ilara swallowed hard. Then we have to stop it. Kael'thar's gaze softened. You are brave, human, but this is no enemy of flesh and scale. It is fire itself, the will that burns stars. She met his eyes, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Then we fight with what it gave us. If the old fire wants its flame back, it can take it from me itself. A rumble of something like sorrow escaped his chest. You do not understand, Ilara. If it comes for you, I will not let it have you. And if I defy it, I may become what I once feared, a destroyer again. Then we do it together, she said. You and me. That's what the bond means, isn't it? He stared at her for a long time before finally bowing his great head. So it shall be. That night the mountain trembled. The stars seemed to waver, their light bending around something vast moving beneath the earth. Flames bled from the cracks in the stone, and rivers of molten light began to crawl down the peaks like veins opening. Dragons took to the skies, their cries sharp and fearful. From every direction a sound rose, not a roar, not a scream, but something deeper, like the heartbeat of the planet itself. The old fire had awakened. Elara and Kael'thar stood at the mouth of the crucible, the same chamber where the bond had been forged. The air shimmered with unbearable heat, the runes along the floor pulsing in time with the fire inside her chest. "It's calling to me," she whispered. "It wants to come home." Kael'thar's scales rippled, his eyes like molten suns. "If you yield, it will consume all things. If you resist, it may destroy you." Then I resist. Without waiting, she stepped into the circle once more. The fire rose around her instantly, golden and white, yet this time it carried a darkness beneath it, a vast hunger, endless and ancient. The voice of the old fire filled her mind, not with words but with will. "Return. You are mine." Elara fell to her knees, clutching her head as images flooded her vision. Galaxies being born in explosions of light, dragons of flame-shaping worlds from molten stone, and humanity rising from the ashes of the same fire. She saw that both species had come from the same origin, two branches of one spark that had been divided too long ago. The fire wanted to reunite them, but not in peace. It would burn away their forms and forge something new, neither dragon nor human, only flame. Kael'thar roared, stepping into the circle despite the heat that seared his wings. "You will not take her," he bellowed, his voice shaking the chamber. The fire struck at him like a living storm, wrapping around his body, clawing at his mind. But he pushed forward, his claws gouging the stone as he reached for her. "Elara, remember who you are." She lifted her head, her eyes blazing with gold. "I see everything, Kael'thar. The fire, it's beautiful, but it wants too much. It wants to erase everything we've become." "Then fight it," he shouted. "You are not its servant, you are its choice." The words struck something deep within her. Its choice. The fire inside her flared, but instead of surrendering, she reached for it. She did not reject it, she embraced it. "I am not yours," she whispered to the flame. "You made me. You made us. But we are not your slaves. We dream now, just as you once did." For the first time, the fire hesitated. The heat dimmed, replaced by a trembling light that seemed almost uncertain. Kael'thar moved beside her, his body half consumed in flame, his eyes meeting hers. "Together," he said. She nodded, and together they raised their hands, hers human, his clawed, both wreathed in living fire. The bond between them ignited. Not in pain this time, but in harmony. The fire roared, not in fury but in awe. It saw itself reflected in their unity, in the strange miracle of two beings bound not by power or fear, but by choice. Light exploded from the crucible, flooding the mountain, the skies, the valleys below. Every dragon, every human, every living thing paused as the world seemed to burn and bloom at once. The fire that had ruled since time began poured out across creation, not to destroy, but to change. When the light finally dimmed, silence fell. The mountain stood still, its molten rivers cooled to glass. The air shimmered with gentle heat, like the breath of summer after a storm. Kael'thar lay upon the stone, his scales cracked but alive, smoke curling from his chest. Elara lay beside him, her hair glowing faintly, her eyes open to the dawn filtering through the cracks above. "Is it over?" she whispered. Kael'thar turned his head slowly, a faint smile curling the edges of his vast mouth. "No, it has only begun." Outside, the world was changing. The dragons that once ruled now walked among the humans, no longer masters, but equals. The flame had not vanished. It lived within every heart, whispering quietly, a reminder of the bond forged in fire and defiance. New forests grew from ash, and rivers ran clear again. The skies, once filled with storms, now carried the scent of rain and freedom. Elara spent her days teaching her people the ways of rebuilding, and the dragons taught them to read the winds, to speak the language of flame. Together they shaped a new age, one of shared strength and quiet peace. But at night, when the valley slept, she would climb the mountain to where Kael'thar rested, his vast form stretched beneath the stars. She would sit beside him, her hand resting on the warm scales of his forearm, and they would talk in low voices about what had been and what might come. Sometimes, the flame inside her pulsed softly, and she would feel his heartbeat answer. It was not the consuming fire of the crucible anymore. It was gentler, patient, alive. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked one night. "The power, the certainty." Kael'thar's great eye turned toward her, gleaming like amber glass. "No, for the first time I feel what I think your kind calls peace. And I have learned something from you, Elara." She smiled faintly. "What's that?" "That dreams are more powerful than fear," he said, "even for dragons." She looked up at the stars, where new constellations shimmered in the clear sky. "Do you think the old fire dreams now?" He was silent for a long time before answering. "Perhaps it does. Perhaps it dreams of us." And as they sat together in the quiet night, a soft breeze swept down from the peaks. It carried the scent of ash and spring, of endings and beginnings. The flame within her heart flickered once, then steadied. No longer a burden, but a promise. Far below, the humans sang their new songs, and the dragons joined their voices, deep and resonant. The sound carried across the reborn world, rising like prayer, like memory. They had been called extinct once, forgotten by gods and time alike. But now, in the dreams of dragons and the hearts of humankind, they lived again. And the fire, ancient, eternal, and at last content, watched over them in silence, dreaming of the future they would build together. The years passed like the slow turning of a great wheel, and the world that had nearly burned to ash grew green again. The bond forged in the crucible had not only saved the world but changed it forever. From the union of dragonfire and human spirit, a new era had begun, one the people called the Dawn of Flame. The mountains that had once been prisons of molten stone now bore fields of gold and crimson flowers that glowed faintly in the dark, each one a living echo of the power that had remade them. The dragons no longer soared as rulers of the sky, but as guardians and teachers, their roars mingling with the hum of human song. Villages had become cities, and cities grew around the roots of the ancient mountains, where stone and scale met in harmony. Elara had become something between legend and leader. She did not age as others did. The fire within her kept her body strong, her eyes bright as dawn. She often walked among her people barefoot, her steps leaving faint trails of light in the dust. Children followed her, laughing, calling her Mother of Flame, though she laughed softly at the title. She did not think of herself as a mother, only as someone who remembered too clearly the pain of being powerless, and who had sworn that none would ever kneel again as she once had. Kael'thar had taken to sleeping for long stretches, his vast body curled around the heart of the crucible where the old fire had once risen. His breath was steady, slow as mountains breathing, and even in sleep his scales shimmered faintly with warmth. When he woke, the valley trembled with joy. When he slept, the stars seemed to lean closer, as though guarding his dreams. Elara often visited him, sitting beside his folded wings, speaking softly though she knew he could hear even in slumber. She told him of the world's progress, of the first human dragon riders who flew not for war, but for exploration, of the songs written in both their languages, of children who could speak to the winds. But peace, even one so deeply earned, never lasted forever. Beneath the calm, a shadow was stirring, a whisper that came not from the earth this time, but from the void above. Strange lights began appearing in the northern sky, cold and colorless, unlike fire. Dragons who flew too close to them returned silent, their eyes dimmed, their scales dulled as though some unseen frost had stolen their heat. The air grew colder, the nights longer, and a sense of unease spread through the valleys. Elara felt it most keenly. The flame inside her began to flicker, not from weakness, but from something else, something watching. One night, As she sat beside Kael'thar's resting form, a sound like glass breaking filled the air. The stars above rippled, and from between them came a streak of light, pale and sharp, falling toward the mountains. It struck beyond the horizon, and a moment later, the ground shook with a deep, hollow thunder. Kael'thar's eyes opened, the molten glow within them returning with terrible clarity. "It has begun again," he murmured, his voice echoing like an ancient bell. Elara rose to her feet, the light beneath her skin pulsing. "What is it?" He unfurled his wings slowly, their span blotting out the moon. "The cold flame," he said, "the shadow that exists to undo creation. It is what the old fire once fought to contain. I had hoped our world was beyond its reach, but when you defied the old fire, you lit a beacon brighter than the stars. Now it comes for that light." Elara's heart raced. "Then we have to face it." Kael'thar looked at her, sorrow deep in his gaze. "To face it is to risk everything we built. It feeds on warmth, on will. It will turn flame to ash, hope to silence. And if it touches your heart, it will unmake you." She squared her shoulders. "I've burned before, Kael'thar. I'll do it again if I have to." He lowered his head until his eyes met hers, their depths glowing with the memory of endless skies. "Then I will stand with you, as I did before." Together they flew toward the north. The land beneath them grew desolate, the trees blackened by frost, the rivers turned to glass. In the distance, the crater still smoked where the streak of light had fallen. Around it the world seemed dead. The air hung still, heavy with the absence of life. As they descended, Elara saw what had come. Something vast and wrong, like a wound in the shape of light. It pulsed faintly, a sphere of shifting gray and silver, neither fire nor ice, but something in between. The ground around it cracked and hissed, frozen stone turning to dust. Kael'thar growled low, a sound that shook the air. "It is not alive. It is hunger given form." Elara stepped forward, her breath visible in the cold. "Then it's time hunger learned what it means to burn." She raised her hands, and the flame within her surged outward, golden and white, painting the ice with warmth. The cold flame pulsed in response, its surface rippling. A sound like whispering voices filled the air, soft and endless. "Give it back," they said. "Light is not for flesh. Fire is not for mercy." Elara's jaw tightened. "Mercy is the only thing that makes it worth having." The thing moved. It didn't lunge or strike. It simply expanded, the air bending around it like reality itself was unraveling. Kael'thar roared and unleashed his own fire, a storm of red and gold that crashed against the void. For a heartbeat, it seemed to hold. But then his flame dimmed, devoured, the heat vanishing into nothing. The cold flame grew brighter, feeding. Elara felt the pull deep inside her, the old fire inside her chest thrashing in defiance. "Kael'thar!" she shouted. "It's draining us both!" He stumbled, his wings faltering. "Then burn brighter!" he roared back. She screamed and let go of every restraint she had held for years. The fire burst from her in waves, her hair turning to light, her skin a silhouette of flame. The bond between them ignited again, stronger than ever, a bridge of living fire that cut through the cold. The void shrieked, its surface fracturing as though it could feel pain for the first time. Kael'thar's voice thundered across the wasteland. "Elara, together!" Their fires intertwined, his ancient, hers new. And the result was not merely heat but creation itself. The ground cracked open, and from the fissures rose pillars of molten stone, swirling around them like a storm made of suns. The cold flame recoiled, folding in upon itself, but they pressed harder, their light growing until the sky itself seemed to ignite. And then there was silence. When the light faded, Elara stood in the center of a vast crater. The cold flame was gone, reduced to a faint shimmer in the air that quickly vanished. Kael'thar lay beside her, unmoving, smoke curling from his scales. She rushed to him, falling to her knees. "Kael'thar," she whispered, her hands trembling as she touched his snout. "Don't you dare leave me now." His voice was faint, barely a breath. "The fire, it took much. But the world is safe." She shook her head fiercely, tears streaking down her face. "No, you're not done. We have so much left. There's still more to build, to see." He exhaled softly, a faint smile in his tone. Then build it. For both of us. His eyes closed, and the glow beneath his scales faded, until only the faint warmth of memory remained. For a long time, Ilara sat in silence beside him, the cold wind sweeping across the ruined plain. Then she stood, wiping her tears, and pressed her hand to his heart. The fire within her flared once, and she whispered, "You said dreams are stronger than fear. Then dream with me, old friend." A soft light spread from her palm, sinking into his chest. It did not awaken him, but it settled there, a quiet ember that would never fade. Years later, when the world had healed again, stories were told of that battle. The children of dragons and humans alike would climb the northern mountains to see the sleeping form of the last great dragon, who lay beneath a mountain of crystal and light. And beside him stood a single figure of gold, Ilara, her flame preserved in eternal motion, her face turned toward the sky. They said that sometimes, when the stars were hidden by storm, the mountain would glow faintly, and the wind would carry a voice, soft, resolute, and warm. It was said to be her, whispering to the fire itself, reminding it what she had once told the old flame long ago. "We are not your servants. We are your dream." And perhaps it was true, for even now the world bore her touch. The rivers still glowed, faintly beneath moonlight, the mountains hummed softly when the sun rose, and the dragons that remained spoke her name in reverence. Humanity, once nearly forgotten, now thrived again. Stronger, wiser, no longer defined by fear or servitude, but by choice, by will, and by the unyielding courage to defy even creation itself for freedom. Far beyond the stars, the old fire stirred once more, but it did not rise in anger. Instead it dreamed, a dream of warmth, of laughter, of two hearts bound in defiance. It dreamed of Ilara and Kalthar, and of the world they had built from ashes. And in that dream, the fire smiled.